The Artful Soul. Today, Rachel Rose from Workshop Muse and Tracy Verdugo discuss curiosity and wonder. Hi, everyone. It's Rachel Rose from Workshop Muse, and I'm here with the next piece of The Artful Soul, inspiration and big ideas for healing, reflection, and learning through the arts. And I hope that you're having fun joining along with me. I've just been so isolated and kind of off in my own world thinking, and I just wanted to reach out to people all across the world and connect and have conversations like over a coffee and just see kind of what emerged and what we can learn from each other. So today I am literally reaching across the world, and we have Tracy Verdugo here. Hello, Tracy. Welcome from across the world from each other is where we are.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah, long way. Yeah. And so Tracy is incredibly inspiring. Tracy's just a really light, wonderful spirit. And what Tracy and I are going to delve into here today is curiosity and wonderism. So Tracy, I thought I would just give you just a little brief introduction here so people kind of have a bit of an idea about you. So this is from Tracy. She says, if Tracy Verdugo was given the opportunity to coin a term for a new art movement based around what she teaches, she might call it curiosity and wonderism, or maybe loosen upism or endless possibilitism. When she's not hanging out with her family in their artsy adobe home in a small village on the shores of Jervis Bay, Australia, or throwing paint around in her little purple studio in her backyard, you may find her wrangling with two large suitcases, attempting to board the BART in San Francisco, en route to teach at an art retreat, or sitting in a circle in St. Pete Beach, Florida, listening intently as women share their stories of creative longing. Tracy is an inspiration, instigator, prolific painter, singer, songwriter, and lover of the written word, smitten traveler and soaker up of all that is beautiful. She teaches her paint mojo and other creative workshops all over this amazing planet and reminds her students of the wonder that already resides in them. So welcome, Tracy. That is an inspiring introduction.
Thank you, Rachel. I couldn't have written it better myself.
I think you did write that. I know. And I was like, really, you like to work with words? That's so good. That's like one of the most beautiful bios I've ever read. You created new words for yourself. How's that for inspiration?
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're a painter, of course, but you're after my own heart. I come from the world of expressive arts, and you're playing with all kinds of creative mediums and all kinds of expression, which I think kind of really relates to our topic we're going to explore here today is curiosity and wonder. So, Tracy, will you just walk us through like what those are like the first words we're seeing on your website? Like, what does curiosity and wonder mean to you? What is this about?
Well, Rachel, before I started teaching these workshops, I actually taught kids classes, after school kids class, for 12 years here in my little studio in the backyard. And I think watching the kids for those 12 years and their sense of curiosity and their sense of wonder really kind of ignited something in me and made me, I don't think I realized it as soon as I started teaching adults, but shortly after I started noticing all the ways in which adults were no longer brave enough to be curious, or let's see, just basically, I had in some ways lost their sense of wonder through being told that this is the way it should be, or this is the way you should be, or the way you should do something in the world. And with the kids I was teaching, I was giving them permission all the time. Like, they came straight from school, and I was really aware that they'd been in a school setting all day long. And so in the art classes, it was like, you guys have permission to do whatever you like. Let's start off with some kind of idea, and then let's let it expand from there. And so, having worked with the kids for so long, when I started working with adults, it was apparent to me that something was missing in that arena of curiosity and wonder. And it became kind of like a mission to me to find ways to encourage people to get back to that.
back to that. And that's like what I would think too. I mean, I have three young children, so I observe like that curiosity and like the imagination piece all the time. And then just like you, I have this juxtaposition where I work with adults and you give people permission to just play, and it's terrifying. It's like for some people it's like I don't even know, what do you mean, but can you give me more structure, those sorts of things. And there's somewhere in between here and there, and for some people more than others or less than others, but it's like the back to piece is really incredible because it feels like something that we're innately born with. Hey.
Yes, yeah, and then slowly it's kind of stripped away and
Yeah.
stripped away.
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting that you talk about the blend or the middle place between those, because I think that's important as well. Like for me, I've been to some kind of purely intuitive art workshops, and I've felt that same sense of, what do you mean just, what do you mean just do something, like,
Yeah.
how do I know what to do? So I try and like balance it out by giving a little structure, but then, or some prompts, some
Mm-hmm.
kind of inspiration to give students a jumping off point, but then encourage them to move in whatever direction they want from that jumping off point.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like having your hand held, right? Like it's like when you haven't, it's scary, right? And I think when you, if somebody's telling you just to do it, or if you're, I'm thinking people that are watching this have been like, yeah, I've tried that, and maybe have like moved into it, and they're like, this person just said do this, and I was like, I don't know where to start, right? But I think having that right person to kind of hold your hand and give you some like safety in terms of like going back to that, because it's such a vulnerable place to be. Going back to curiosity and wonder is the absolute unknown, and so having somebody like yourself who can like hold hand, give a bit of structure, but no one to push or no one to lean back, like sit back and let the wonder happen is a gift for sure, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of fun in wonder. There's a lot of, we will do things like we'll go out into nature, depending on where we are. But if we're in an area where there is kind of interesting nature around us, we'll go out and we'll collect like whatever we can find that could give us interesting marks. Sometimes we'll even make brushes from, like branches of a tree or twigs and things like that, or interesting like pine cones and kind of thing. And you just, when you see faces light up, when you like dip, say, a pine cone into some paint, and then just say, if you were a 3-year-old, what would you do with this thing? Like, what could you do? Well, and they'll start yelling it, and they'll be like, you could roll it. You could roll it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could stamp it. You could like splat with it. And so you see the imagination and that kind of the wonder return, and people start, and then they see the marks that they can make.
Yeah.
And it just, it's an amazing thing to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another time recently,
thing.
we were in Spain, and I took them on an excursion to just a little cheap shop, like a little, I don't know what you call them in Canada, but just like a bargain shop, you get dollar store, I guess,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. And so the prompt was to just go and find something that was €1 or less that would make interesting marks.
Right.
It was hilarious. It was hilarious.
People like have to go into that container and look for something, right? Yeah.
So of course they came back with feather dusters and textured dog toys and all kinds of stuff. And we had the best morning just playing and making marks that formed the basis of the paintings that we were going to create.
Right.
So it is about playing.
Yeah, playing, right? Like, I mean, curiosity, wonder, playing, imagination, they're all kind of like words that are interconnected too. And it's funny because just as you were talking about like going outside, finding objects, that sort of thing, like for me, that's why the mindfulness piece has such a nice fit, right? And that's just, I've explored mindfulness in my own life, and I've always been doing expressive arts, and like I just couldn't see them as any difference, because of course in mindfulness there's a lot around exploring a curious spirit, right? Around not having like a thought or a judgment around things already, not being like, well, that's just a pine cone, nobody paints with pine cones, or that will probably make stupid marks, but being like curious, thinking like, what marks does a pine cone make, right?
Yeah.
Like rather than already seeing the end and thinking you know how it's going to unfold, just being curious and just staying with like, well, okay, this does this, and maybe I'm not really keen about that, but this part over here, right? Like I'm curious about that, and just following one thing to another, right? And that's like presence, right? That's mindfulness right there. And as you're describing mark making, like is there a more simple way to just like express, to just be with paint and paper and marks, right?
Exactly. And also, I think there's a lot of, there has to be a total sense of non-attachment to outcome when you're using these kind of tools, because, and I think that I kind of, when I'm demonstrating with them myself, the students can see that, well, I've never had this particular stick or thing in my hand before. So I
Right.
actually really don't know what it's going to do. But they can see my sense of curiosity around it.
Right.
And they can, it doesn't even matter if it doesn't make a mark or if it doesn't do what you think it might do, or, it's like, that's all okay as well.
Right.
There's no like, oh, it should do this thing. And so
Right.
that's what.
Or I did this thing this one time and I really want to replicate it again, right?
Yes.
Like, yeah, oh, that I gotta get those pine cones with that little ridge like that, right? It's like in the moment. It's like that one tool, and you're traveling to these retreats all over, right? So I'm sure you're like different flora, fauna around you, right? Like it would not in different seasons, like you would have different
I love it.
presenting, yeah, right? And you're going to
Fantastic.
just trust that there's something there, right? Because there's always something there. There's not like you could be, I do lots of work around like asking people just to look in like small areas or small spots and being like, what's in this one little centimeter square, right? And what's, like, let's be with that, because I think like when we talk about containers and stuff, like I think when things are really big, that's where people get overwhelmed, right? They stay in their head and they get locked in their head. And that's where it's like really terrifying to just like curious, wonder, like intuitive, I don't know what I'm doing, right? And so like if we can just kind of start by making like scaffolding it, right? Like as we would for children, right? We don't expect you to write essays. We start with the alphabet, right? And so there's kind of a sense that that's where breaking it down and just going really small and just playing and learning a new language almost, right?
That's so interesting that you're saying that, because I do something similar right at the beginning of a workshop. So I want the students always to kind of familiarize themselves with wherever we are, whether we're in a warehouse in Madison, Wisconsin, or whether we're out in the woods or at the beach. We need to somehow begin to soak up what's around us. So I have them do an exercise where they go out and collect symbols and patterns, just little tiny drawings in their sketchbooks. And some places are more inspiring than others. And sometimes I'll be in a place and I'll be like, wow, we're in a warehouse and there's a car park outside.
Yeah, like is this gonna work, right?
Where are we going to find the inspiration? But that's when I do the same thing that you're talking about, where I say, okay, open our eyes. Let's really become the observers of everything that is around us, because we walk through the world half the time, most of the time, not seeing anything, right? And so I'll say, okay, look up, and sometimes there'll be like a pattern on the ceiling or in some grates or something, some kind of electrical ducting, that has some weird marks on it, and look down, look underneath, and they'll start, crawling around, looking underneath tables, and then they'll see a pattern on somebody's bag, or, and then they'll be looking at each other and at their aprons, and they'll be finding all kinds of symbols. And so as soon as you begin to kind of just look from all of those different perspectives and really open your eyes, which is what being an artist is about, I think, that's when the magic starts to happen.
Yeah. That's really cool to think that you go to places where it's like, oh, like what, but there's still so much, right? There's still so much. And I think like, in expressive arts and other, like the trusting the process, like just kind of seeing how things are going to unfold, like that wisdom to come back to being like, I don't know what's here. Like, let's just see what's here. And let's just, start to train our eyes. And the other beautiful thing that I was just thinking, as you said, that is like, so for me in my work, I'm always looking for like, we build the muscle in the creative space, and then that informs our regular life, right? So I'm always looking to kind of thread back and forth and find meaning. And I can just imagine the experience of being like closed, right? Being like, I'm not an artist, or I don't know what I'm doing or whatever. There's nothing here. And then going in and being like, actually abundance is here, right? And like, what meaning could that derive for how you live your life, how you're walking through with blinders on? Like, I can just see so much opportunity to connect back and really make sense for everybody's own experience in terms of how that can inform who they are.
Well, the funny thing is, when I started doing this work, I've been on my own spiritual path for probably 25 years, and like really had taken in a lot of wisdom from people like Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra, and just some really strong mentors. And when I first started teaching, I wasn't so inclined to blend the two. I was a new teacher. I wasn't going out as a spiritual teacher. I didn't, I didn't want to alienate anybody. And so I thought I was just teaching painting. So this is like 8 years ago when I first started doing workshops. And I remember the first time this beautiful woman, an older student, came up to me. She just lost her son to cancer for 6 months or so. And she said to me, honey, you're not just teaching about painting, you're teaching about the process of letting go. And I was like, and she had told me her story already, and I was just like so honored and so touched. And it really sparked something in me where I began to recognize everything that I was teaching and learning in art as a metaphor for life. Just like you're saying, just kind of going back and forth, like, wow, that's exactly what we're doing right here. Do that in these areas of our life as well.
Yeah, it's like, and you can have it, you can feed it back and forth. You can practice it in real life and bring it into your art practice, or you can practice it in art and bring it into real life, right? Like you can, and it's interesting when you say too, because I mean, I don't know, I guess I was just gonna say, like, have I always done the two? I don't know, but it's been a long time where I can't see one without the other. Like they're very interlocked for me. And I recognize that that's not the case for everybody, right? And so maybe it's that I just started to see it or experiencing it, and then I couldn't like unravel the two, like they became fused. But when I think about it, I'm like, I think when I was younger, if I think back to being younger, when I thought I was making things, or the yearning was still the same. I thought the product was what mattered, and I thought that like painting, or I have a performing arts background and those sorts of things, like I think I was like always wanting, I always felt this like gravitational pull to it, and I didn't know. But when I gave myself permission to be like, what is that full gravitation about? Like it's about that. So I think that like the gravitational pull around being, why is it that people want to create, like whether we're aware of it or not? I think like in terms of what we're talking about here, the artful soul, like I think our souls want to create for these reasons, right? I think we know that there's more there than it's beautiful, it's lovely to make beautiful art and those sorts of things, or express yourself, but I think our souls know that there's something more there for us. And is that what you see with your students?
Absolutely, for sure. There's a yearning, and I kind of feel like I always used to talk about there being two, lots of great spiritual leaders have talked about love and fear, right? So everything's either based in love or based in fear. And I feel like with creativity, the opposite to that is stagnancy. And so you're either stagnating in your life or you're creating in your life. And it doesn't have to be art. It could be you're an avid gardener, or you knit at night, or you love to cook and you really do that with gusto. And, and the other side is being scared to do everything, and just being stuck and not being able to get in your life. And so I always feel like if you can just make a move, just get the momentum going, you can start to move away from that stagnant place and come more into creative flow in every area of your life. Yeah.
I always call that like creative inertia, right? Like it's like the biggest boulder to move when you're like stuck and you haven't been creating and you've been thinking about it, or like like to find that first bit of momentum is the hardest, because you're stopped and you need to find that energy and you need to let that energy flow. But then once you start to let the energy flow, it almost has this like energy that takes on about itself, right? And then sometimes like I talk about ebb and flow in my work, right? And how like you're not always going to be like, you need to rest and there's back and forth. But if you stay healthy and you're mostly in that place, then it's never as hard to build that first inertia as it was the first time, right?
exactly. And I talk about that as well. Like when I'm traveling for 4 months, I have very little opportunity to paint, because it
Hmm.
takes effort to get all your paints out and to kind of set up somewhere. And we're in an Airbnb for 3 days, and so
Yeah.
the first time I sat down to paint after maybe 3 months on the road, I went through the whole, kind of beginner mind thing again.
Yeah.
Oh, this sucks, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, what am I even doing? And
I've
I mean,
lost it. Yeah.
well, I kind of knew intellectually I haven't lost it, but I was going through all of those mental processes that I know my students go through. But that's also beautiful to go through because then I
Hmm.
can really relate and I can actually
Hmm.
talk about it. I can say,
Hmm.
hey, I feel exactly the same way. It's
Hmm.
normal. Practice.
It's a terrifying place to be. It
For
really
a
is.
reason. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's called a practice because we
Yeah.
need to keep at it.
Yeah. That's again just as like kind of just a place to kind of maybe wrap this up or bring it to a close, just to connect back to that. I think that's what's beautiful about the words curiosity and wonder. Is there
Yeah,
something about it being the way I interpret it, at least in the moment, right? Curiosity isn't this like it's epic, but it's also expressed in just like a thought, a notion in a small way, right? Like wondering, giving yourself permission just to go there. And when we think about doing just being curious about like one thing, one shape, one line, one mark, whatever, like that feels more manageable than painting the masterpiece behind your head there, right? Like that feels, but that's how we get there is through the, and so the curiosity and the wonder feel like really delicate and precious and like something that maybe we could just allow ourselves to touch. And so I think there's a lot of wisdom there in terms of like just like let's just start with being curious about something, right?
right, exactly. If we have time, real quick, one
Mhm,
of
yeah.
the very old blog posts, but if the viewers looked up just Tracy Verdugo blog, 30 days of painting on one canvas. I did a challenge maybe about 2 years ago. It was one of the most incredible things I've ever done. And it was just one small 20-inch canvas. And every day I just had to approach that canvas kind of like an open mind and a curious mind and just make a move on it. Like do something that would challenge me in some way, like that would
Mhm.
create a new opening for the next day. And I got to several places. I documented the whole thing, posted online, and there were probably 5 or 6 times during the 30 days where the painting was finished. And
Right.
everybody was like, don't do another thing. Stop. Don't touch it. And I'm like, I have to keep going. I have another 14 days. They're like, just do one dot each day.
Right, right. Don't
I'm like,
wreck it.
well,
Yeah, you're gonna
that,
overwork
no,
it.
no,
Right.
so I kept reinventing and changing and moving and pushing through and being curious about what was next. It was an incredible um, challenge to myself. And I learned so much. And since then, other people have gone on to do it. So I would encourage anybody to kind of go and have a look at that because
Yeah,
every day
that
I
sounds
documented how
cool.
I felt about it as well. So the days when I felt really horrible about it and the days where I felt like I was open to the next thing, the days where I had regrets, the days,
Right.
it's a very interesting process.
And about being intentionally curious, right?
Yes,
Like rather than the judgment of being like this. Yeah, wow, that sounds really incredible. Yeah, I'm gonna check that out for sure. Wow, that's a wonderful way to
absolutely.
close, Tracy. That's a lovely inspiration. So we'll all have to go off and check that out. So thanks so much, Tracy, for talking about curiosity and wonder with us. Thanks for sharing your stories about your amazing retreats you do. So you do retreats all around the world, is what my impression is, and you have online courses that you offer as well. Yeah, and where can people like? So I have links to find people, but are you like mostly on Instagram? Or are you mostly on Facebook? Where do you go?
Pretty much half half. So Instagram probably a little bit more. So just a
Hmm.
Tracy,
Yeah.
and then I have a couple of groups on Facebook as well. And pretty easy to find because everything's under my name. So
Yeah, your website. And we've got links to your website too, so people can learn more about your and check out your beautiful art too. You really have such a strong voice in your work as well too. So I think I'm gonna come have to find you in Bali and come do
oh,
a painting retreat
sure,
with you. Once my
absolutely.
kids are like a little bit older, I am like about to cash a big check with some grandparent like babysitting, and I'm gonna go do something like that. So I'm gonna keep my eye on my radar for you. So yeah.
Fantastic.
Okay, well, check out Tracy's work. Tracy, again, thank you so much, and we'll look forward to continuing to reflect and learn and continuing on in this journey. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rachel. Bye.
Bye.